This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world. You're listening to Place to Be Nation's Main Event, a roundtable experience looking at today's pro wrestling landscape. And now, here's your host, Scott Criscuolo.
January 24th, 2014. On that day, the earth swallowed us whole, and with it, a dynasty was born. Welcome, everyone, to a very special occasion, a special evening here at placetobenation.com. It is episode 100 of your home for everything modern-day wrestling from all over the world. Place to Be Nation's Main Event. I am your co-host, Scott Criscuolo. This is the second show in the last, 5 months, I think, or 4 months, to hit 100. Obviously not counting myself and my PIC on the Place to Be podcast. We're up like 480-something. But just recently, the hard-traveling fanboys just hit 100. Mr. Phillips and Nikki D. And now here, we have hit number 100 here at Place to Be Nation's Main Event, and it is a very festive occasion. And we've turned back the clock this evening, and we're gonna have some fun looking back at the last 4+ years of Place to Be Nation's Main Event, and talk about how wrestling has evolved, because it doesn't seem like it, but wrestling has changed in the last 4+ years, particularly, of course, in WWE. Let me bring in my current co-host. He's the co-host of the Kings of Sport. He did an exceptional Impact podcast earlier in the week or last week. And I'm going to see if he could guess when he was his first appearance on the Main Event. The Godfather, Nate Milton.
What is going on, Brother Scott? It is a celebration, if you will, and it is good to be here for episode 100 of the Main Event, and I have been the tag team partner on this back end of the March to 100, and it's been fun.
It's been a blast.
But before I get to answering the trivia question, I have to let the listeners know if they're new to the program and they're just jumping on with episode 100. You know, there was an idea about 4 years ago, and Scott knows this, called the Main Event. The idea was to bring together a group of remarkable people and see if they could become something more. See if they could work together when we needed them the most to review the good and bad wrestling that most of us never could.
It's true. And guess what? It almost worked.
It almost worked.
No. Anyway, Brother Nate, you have been on, since, you've been my co-host since, probably, we're going to go through, we're not going to go through every episode, obviously, because we're going to do a couple of fun things.
This has been about a year and a half.
So probably
not quite 2 years yet?
70-something, probably?
Yeah, not quite 2 years.
So we're obviously going to call this the Wilt Chamberlain episode. 100 points, 100 women, a night. And of course, he scored 100 points in 1960?
Yeah, which you can't see right now if you're listening at home. Scotty's holding up a piece of paper with 100 scribbled on it.
That's right. Which, by the way, was his
in the locker room.
Yeah, which, by the way, was his room number at the at the Hershey Holiday Inn. So, all right, Brother Nate, let's bring in the gang, because obviously I could not do this without the gang that got us started from the beginning, and some of them haven't been on in ages. Yes.
So you're saying the statute of limitations is up?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So now they're back. We're rebooting. We used to call them, of course, and they still are, and they always will be, the Core Four. 3 of them are live tonight. One of them could not make it tonight, but you will hear that fourth gentleman's voice later on in the program. Let me bring on first the one member of the Core Four that you've heard lately. He's kind of become a semi-regular again here to the Main Event, and he kind of leads us when we do our TNA pay-per-view recaps, which we will be doing on our next episode. 101, we'll be doing our next TNA recap. He is the conscience of Place to Be Nation. He's the only one who remembers every minute of WrestleMania weekend based on the Popcast. Nobody remembers fucking anything. Mr. Steve Willie.
Scott, Nate, it is a pleasure, of course. It has been a long time. I have not been on since episode, hold on a second, 99. That is the last time I was on, was episode 99. That's so right. It has been a minute, as they say, and I am happy to be here as always.
Yes, it's always good to have you on, Steve, and you are the conscience. You were referred to, by the way. I listened to the Popcast with Jen and Tim and Nick Duke, who I can't believe actually remembered most of what the fuck he did. There are some holes in Jen's story. I don't know what's going on there, but no, it's actually a fun listen. So if you want to listen to the newest episode of on the PTBN Pop feed, the Popcast with Jen Smith, Tim Capel, and Nick Duke, they go over the revelry of WrestleMania weekend. It's not really the wrestling portion of it, so it was pretty good listen.
And if you want to drop my name in any podcast, I will. It will increase your numbers by at least 1 or 2.
Yeah,
feature or drop my name in the indie podcast.
Well, your name was dropped
listen.
once by Nick Duke.
Yeah.
Did you remember even seeing him? Because he probably doesn't remember seeing you.
I complimented him on his barbecue.
Okay.
I believe that was all I saw him.
So did you did not see him run?
Can't say anything else.
You did not see him run his fingers through Mark Claire's hair.
I can't comment on any of Nick Duke's.
Okay. Right. I don't even know if that even happened. I think he wrote it down. I think he wrote it down on his Superstore bag that he left at Nick in Mark Claire's room. All right.
My tongue is literally bleeding right now.
I'm going to leave it at that because I'm just leaving it at that. All right. Anyway, Brother Steve, always a pleasure. Now, time to bring in two gentlemen who have not been on in a while. One gentleman, you can hear him consistently and always on the Exceptional NBA Team podcast with Mr. Adam Murray. I haven't had him on this in a while, and it's way overdue. And he was sad when he couldn't have my brother on this year on the March Madness podcast, but my brother's fandom is under investigation like his team is. This guy is never under investigation. The Boogie of the Bayou, Mr. Andrew Reich.
Hey, it's good to be back. If the Willie bump is like +1, the Reach bump is probably like -5. I would gauge that right now. So we'll see where the listen count is.
Well, if you're -5, then our last guest is like -70. He is. He is the another cog of the Core 4 machine. He now just trolls poor schlubs who live in their basement, and he's sitting there with his Scott Mitchell jersey on tonight, praying another 5 wide receivers don't get picked tonight in the NFL draft. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot believe I'm saying this gentleman's name because it has been way too long for Mr. Jordan Duncan.
Hey, have the Lions drafted the NWO yet? I think they're going to go full flare and draft the NWO tonight. So, hey, Scott, thanks for having me back. Listen, I haven't been on the show for a while, but I still listen, so I know you guys like to do the jersey numbers, and your last episode you were lamenting it a little bit. So let me say that tonight is the Joel Deaton episode, because he was the number 100 ranked wrestler in the inaugural PWI 500.
Really?
Joel Deaton. Yes. Wow. Don't ask me who he is because I legitimately have no idea.
I was going to say this is the DeJuan Wagner episode because he scored 100 points in a high school game.
He did, just like Big. But did he do 100 things like Wilt did after the game at the Hershey Holiday Inn? Although he didn't get his women like Bill Cosby did. Anyway, enough of that. Guys, it is a now. Of course, the fourth member of the Core 4 could not join us live this evening, but I did. I'm breaking the fourth wall. It's been 100 fucking episodes. Yesterday, I got to talk to the great Mr. Ben Morse, and he will be. I'll have my piece with him right before we go to break tonight.
He's probably watching Infinity Wars.
Yeah, exactly. It's war. What is there? 2 movies at once?
I don't know.
Wars.
I heard the final scene is Matthew Broderick plays Thanos at like tic-tac-toe until he gives up. Or is that Infinity War games?
He's eating raw corn.
I thought Infinity War games was when you had Thanos' army in one cage and the Avengers in another cage, and there were two rings.
And Thanos power bombs Ant-Man, but his head hits the ceiling.
That was a classic squash.
And Thanos' crew always gets the extra man advantage because that's how it works.
Like, why does the coin flip always favor Thanos?
I know, damn it! It's because he's got all the jewels.
But if Cable fights Thanos, who plays Thanos and who plays Cable?
I know, right?
I'm still confused by that.
Well, that's like Flair and the Black Scorpion. We don't know I don't know which is which.
So Ole Anderson's going to be in Deadpool, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes. Oh God, he isn't a Deadpool.
No, wait, he already is in Deadpool. He's the old lady.
A pool of what we don't know, but so the Buffalo Bills draft hat says Believe. I think it would be better if it said Believe, and then I think we'd all be Bills fans. That's what I think. All right, guys, we started our first episode on January 24th, 2014. So the show is about as old as the network is, because episode 2. And I want somebody to keep. Steve, I trust you the most. If JD does it, he'll add random names.
Like Joel Deaton?
Like Joel Deaton, who was a guest at episode 38. Keep tabs. I want to see what our final tally is of the number of different guests that have ever been on the show. So, all right. Now, obviously, you guys aren't. Well, write the 4 of you down, Steve, because you guys obviously count. So, all right. Now, episode 2.
I've already lost track.
Well, episode 2, Brad Woodling came on, and that would have probably killed any show. But episode 2 is interesting because the first thing I want to talk about before we get into the evolution, no pun intended, of the product itself. We spent that episode talking about the controversy over the Edge 90. This tells you how picky we were. Over the Edge 99 being on the network. That was like our big discussion. You know, oh my God, are they going to edit out the whole thing with Owen? Are they going to put it on at all and all that kind of thing? JD, think back to then and think to now. Has the network evolved into what you thought it was going to be, or has it gone completely different in terms of what they've made the network into now as compared to what we used to talk about in 2014 when it first launched?
I think a lot of it is what I expected, with the library and the vault. Some stuff that I thought we would see we saw bits and pieces of, but never really came into fruition I remember we talked, I don't know if it was on episode 2 or some episodes of the past, we talked about them doing like almost like Sports Center type shows throughout the week, with Renee and whoever was backstage at the time. And we got Talking Smack and we get like the live panels before their pay-per-views, and that's about it. But I remember we had discussions about, like on a Tuesday afternoon, like a highlight, like a 30-minute Sports Center type show. And
right.
We never saw anything really like that. Honestly, I think the thing that surprised me is their original content, because it's not what I think any of us would have predicted. What's their prank show that they came out with?
Punked.
Well, no, it wasn't Punked.
Swerved.
Yeah.
Swerved.
Yeah, but I mean, like, stuff like that is stuff we never would have predicted. I mean, obviously we knew there'd be original content, but I think we all kind of thought it would be, like sports style or documentaries, which they've done bits and pieces of, but not as much as I anticipated, no.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the one thing I remember saying, and JR and I did a Place to Be podcast episode about this the day it launched. The one thing I thought they should have done, and they're actually going to do it, and they've done it a couple of times already, is use it as an outlet for kind of wonky, different live events. And obviously, we're recording this on Thursday. Tomorrow is a perfect example of that, when they do the big Greatest Royal Rumble show in Saudi Arabia. I didn't want to do picks tonight because the show is so early on Friday that it would have been I didn't want to date the show. I wanted to kind of be something people could listen to all the time. So I wasn't going to get into picks or anything tonight. I will quickly say that I think Braun does win the Rumble.
I think that makes the most sense.
I think Braun wins a Rumble, and I think Knock beats AJ. That's my hot take. I think Knock beats AJ. And I think Joe costs Roman the title in the cage. That's just my quick hot takes on that. Cool. What do you think, Riche? Has the network evolved into what you thought it would be when you first saw it 4 years ago?
I think they've improved vastly with their in-studio stuff. I remember one thing that was sort of off-putting about the network when they first launched it is that they had been trying to get it off the ground for about 3 years. So they had a lot of canned stuff. Like I think the story was at Legends House, if anybody remembers that. That was that documentary show. That had been in the can for years. And they were just trying to find the right outlet to put it out with, but they couldn't get anybody to jump on as a provider for an actual WWE network. And then they funneled it into the on-demand service.
Right.
So they were sort of experimenting with all these different things. Like, what if we had our own network? What would we do? Let's do, like, post and pre-show Raw, like, pre-Raw shows. And like you were saying, like I remember that WrestleMania week of WrestleMania 30, they had a show, like a studio show every day until WrestleMania 30.
Yep.
And it got to be a little grating. I ain't going to lie to you. There was a point where it's like, okay, is this a little bit too much? And I know that a lot of people would say, well, it does feel like too much when you're showing a lot of these, like for example, the Greatest Royal Rumble, which is promoted pretty much for the network, and other kind of house shows that they feel are significant. But I don't think that's necessarily overexposure. I think they've become much, much better at the strategy portion of it, of just marketing and picking the right spots to promote shows and to keep their name going throughout the year, instead of just kind of like bundling it all into one season and just hoping that you can get subscribers. I feel like their subscriber count's gotten to a point where they don't feel desperate all the time, and it's given them a little bit of comfort to try new things. Like, I'll give you an example. I really like what they've done with Pritchard, where they've just basically just given him this outlet to just do his show unabridged for like an hour and a half, with with very little editorial interference. And I mean, some people will complain about the other, like those in-between shows. There's too many pay-per-views, and now you have the whole new thing with the pay-per-views being 4 hours for, like, basically 2 hours for one brand and 2 hours for another once a month. But at the end of the day, I do feel like they've gotten a better handle of how to put it together. But the one thing that definitely stands out to finish this is I think their in-studio original production has become extremely good, almost on the level of like basically any on-demand service that you can think of.
All right, episode 3, no guests, but we talked about the death of Mabel. Very interesting. JD, I'm sure, had some hot takes.
Sad day.
Episode 4, Steve, add the name Aaron George was a guest on that evening.
Ooh.
Episode 5, let's see. Just the normal core 4. Episode 6 was the WrestleMania 30 preview, and Johnny Reckless was on that one, so there you go. Nate, what do you think in 4 years how the network has evolved? Is it what you've expected?
It's interesting because I was very skeptical at first. I was somebody that enjoyed the WWE 24/7 cable channel. I thought that was a cool thing. And then when the plans for the network were announced, I was like, okay, this could work, but it was still, and I think that part of the growing pains that they had in those early years were they were still waiting for technology to catch up and for people to become more comfortable with technology. And so those early years where we kind of saw people warming up to the network and then kind of going through hits and misses, like you mentioned, Legends House and some of the other prepackaged shows, and just the task of getting this library online, I think, was something that had gotten a lot of discussion from the fan base. But I'd say by the time we hit year 2 or 3 of the network, they were on their way to becoming, the standard in the industry. And so, like, if you look at the network now, I think, kind of going back to our Marvel talk at the top of the show, they are just getting ready to start maybe phase 3 of the network. Phase 1 was just getting it off the ground. Phase 2 was, completing these libraries and getting these shows from the archives that people wanted to see up and running and making the technology barrier something less, so it wasn't as intimidating for some of the people out there. But I think the third stage of the network is really going to involve kind of expanding and really digging into what they can use this for. And one of the things we've talked about on this show that I think you miss and you lose by going to a digital era instead of, the DVDs era that we were just kind of getting out of is kind of special features and different featurettes and commentary tracks. And I think that's something you can do when you own all of this stuff. You can just bring Stone Cold into a studio one week and have him sit down with Jim Ross and talk about, his 5 greatest matches. And we're watching the matches and hearing JR and Stone Cold give us alternate commentary over the top of that. I think that's kind of the next phase of the network, is really getting deep into what we can or what they can do, because they own everything. So you might as well maximize this investment.
Mm-hmm. Episode 7, Steve, was the first one where good old Will from Texas made his debut. Of course, as we all know, that will not be Will's most memorable episode.
No. Another guest.
Not at all.
We'll get there. Don't worry.
Are you talking about the Aubrey Sitters episode?
Stop tipping.
He who shall not be named.
Former IDW comic book writer Aubrey Sitterson.
We'll get to him later.
IDW, isn't that the internet people that complain about wrestling?
Yeah, didn't I trash them in episode 2? Steve, your thoughts on the network from then to now?
Oh, I thought you meant on that episode.
Oh, no. I can replay that.
I could straight shoot on that one. On the network, for the last year, I think it's really gotten into its own. I like what you said, Andrew, about now that they have a certain amount of subscribers, they can experiment a little bit. I stopped watching, not stopped, but really slowed down in my watching because I wasn't enjoying some of the alternative content. But now I really look forward to essentially every 2 months they put some sort of new classic content on. Yeah. The Thunder. I kind of pick out a couple things that I'd like to watch, and I just watch them until I get bored of them. So like right now I'm doing the 92 WCW since they added the Saturday nights on there. And trying to get, I keep hearing how great NXT is this year, so I started watching that, and I've been watching the World Class, as I've said on this show before, keeping up with Pete Schermacher's podcast on the Pro Wrestling Only feed.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, it's just really fun, and I don't even have to watch the scripted stuff, which it's just not my cup of tea. I understand that lots of people like it, and I can understand why. Hashtag Dylan Hales. And that's a total Dylan thing to say, and I realized it as I was saying it. And I've talked to some people, at work. I had a client who just got the network for the first time, and he's just excited to see the pay-per-views. He doesn't care about NXT. He tried watching it, said he didn't like it, and he's just so excited to be able to see the pay-per-views for the first time in his life.
And I'm glad Steve mentioned that. That I think one of the things that really stands out with the network from the 4 years is the vitality of NXT. Because without that network, NXT would basically be nothing. It would be a feeder system that nobody ever saw. And now NXT's, in a lot of people's eyes, is probably the most attractive part of the WWE product entirely. So that's a big part of what makes the network successful too.
Yeah, before the network, I was doing like YouTube and Daily Motion searches to get like the FCW show, which was,
trash.
It was far inferior. You'd have an occasional like amazing Cesaro match, or when he popped up, or
Alberto Banderas. Remember him?
Yes.
Antonio.
And then every once in a while, Regal would get in the ring and just have a masterpiece.
Yep. Episode 11. Graham Cawthon was on. He probably doesn't remember. I'm sure he was drunk. But
I
Duke
met him.
Spirit animal.
Yes.
I met him in person over the weekend.
And is his hair just as lush as Mark Claire's is?
I'm going that Mark Claire is 0.9 Graham. I enjoy Graham's hair far better. We're Facebook buddies. It's not like we talk much, just from the few shows we were on, and we totally recognized each other, and just a gentleman. was good to see him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I hope he comes up to MetLife next year. I'm looking forward to that. Let's see. We mentioned. Thurman, it's a report. Johnny Reckless. Glenn Butler made his premiere in episode 14.
Yay!
Glenny Bun made it. Episode 15 is when Reesh and I went on our that was
Date.
August August 2nd, 2014 is episode when Reesh and I went on our Brock Lesnar Trash Fest. That was a lot of fun. We bonded that night, Reesh. And he's still a part-time asshole.
It would probably be a hot episode right now.
It still continues. Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, nothing's changed. And now he's not even as hot financially as he used to be. Now he's just dull. All right, let's talk. Before we go, I want to save WWE for last. Let's talk about indies in general. Steve, not Impact. We'll talk about them because really, has anything changed in 4 years? Like Ring of Honor, Chikara, I don't know, New Japan. Like, what has changed in some indie promotions, some of the big ones over the last 4 years? Do you think since we started?
I think with having bigger platforms to put out their own product, to kind of self-finance and go out on their own, do streaming services, maybe hop on to streaming services like High Spots. You're seeing a big revolution of shows, not just Ring of Honor having more money and going a little bit of a different direction and having some really amazing marketers / wrestlers like the Bucks and such. But I think wrestling's hot again. Maybe not drawing for house shows in WWE, but I think just wrestling in general is hot. We had a show up here. I've talked before on Main Event that we have a local promotion that's run by Hornswoggle, and it generally gets like 400, 500 people. And last year he started doing a kind of a one-off show where it'd be all local guys, but now he would bring in like Hall of Fame type guys. And he did it this year. Got hooked up with the local, the Bucks, is it G League, right? The G League,
The G
Andrew?
League, yes.
Yes, the G League,
bought
the
it out.
Gatorade League, yeah. Stupid.
And we joke about Impact sometimes, and we think that Scott Steiner might have performed in front of more people Saturday night in Oshkosh than he did on the Impact pay-per-view, because they drew over 2,500 people.
Wow.
Yep, for a local show with like Scott Steiner, Jeff Jarrett, just doing little MVP, like doing autographs and stuff like that. And that's a nothing promotion. It's just I shouldn't say that because that's denigrating it, but it's just a local hot promotion with just dudes. And there's little indies popping up all over the place. You have like AAW, who's been around for a while, but they're starting to pop big crowds. And there are people who will make TV maybe for Lucha Underground or get buzz in PWG. And they are starting to make the circuit, and they're starting to make really good money by selling T-shirts. And, with Impact, one of the great things, and I know you said we'll talk about them later, but if you look at the pay-per-view and some of the tapings coming up, they're starting to use indie guys and letting them stay on the indies, and it's very much a symbiotic relationship. It helps Impact, it helps the guys on the indies make money, and you can really see over WrestleMania weekend how successful all of those shows were. Mm-hmm. Besides your Ring of Honor and your WrestleMania. I mean, we went to shows where there are a good 1,000 people. We went to some that, maybe only had a few hundred, but people can make really good livings now if they are able to market themselves and stand out. Mm. And you don't have to be 300 pounds and 6'4".
Exactly. Well, JD is 300 pounds and 6'4". Oh no, I'm sorry. JD is 300 pounds and 5'4". Oh, sorry.
Ouch.
340 pounds, actually.
By the way, the episode 15 that we bashed Brock reached, that was Chad Campbell's debut episode on Main Event.
Or was it Jordan Duncan?
It was me. It was me, sorry.
Episode 16. Remember this one? We had the guy from the Sports Hub in Boston, James Stewart. I remember that one.
Oh, he was good.
He was very good.
Oh, that was a
I loved him in North by Northwest, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I know. Let's talk about Brock Lesnar.
I know who's going to win the Money in the Bank.
Belly Cat, man.
While I look up more past guest hosts, Nate, you're what do you think of the last 4 years since from when main event debuted to now about the Indies?
I thought you were going to ask my Jimmy Stewart impression. Hey, sing a couple lines of Buffalo Girl when you come out tonight.
He's clearly talking about former Jacksonville Jaguars running back James
Stewart, little man. The pride of Knoxville, Tennessee.
It's funny because Steve mentioned wrestling being hot now, and I think wrestling it's going to be hard for it to ever be as hot as it was in the 80s and the 90s, just because of the way, again, going back to technology, the way people get their entertainment nowadays, everything is so individualized and a la carte that I think it's going to be hard for it to get that overall acceptance. But for the people that are into wrestling and the kind of new fans that are kind of coming into it, it's as hot as it's been since that Attitude Era peak.
Right.
And I think a big part of that is you're seeing more cooperation between some of these independent companies. You're seeing a resurgence in New Japan, and they're making inroads into North America. You're seeing, ROH continuing their high level of in-ring. Let's just say in-ring, because I still grapple, no pun intended, from time to time with their storytelling, but their in-ring is still top-notch. Impact Wrestling, they are on their third or fourth reboot in 4 years, and then at least early on, this one looks like it might be working. But then you mentioned just kind of the way people can get these shows, whether you talk about the events that happened during WrestleMania weekend that people could stream, or kind of the Flow Slam experiment. Even though it didn't ultimately work, it was still kind of a step into this new way that we kind of consume wrestling content that isn't WWE. And so I think we're going to continue down that path. I think that particularly if you can put your egos aside, which is always a big if when it comes to entertainment and sports, I think there's a lot of money on the table for a lot of different companies to be able to eat. And so, yeah, this is not as hot a time as, the 80s and the 90s peak of wrestling popularity, but just in terms of what we get and the quality of what we get, it might be the best time to be a wrestling fan.
We had an episode called Falling Off the Rails. I might have to listen to that one. Episode 20, we actually had CRZ on, Christopher Robin Zimmerman.
I think Falling Off the Rails is when we talked about James Storm and Mickey James.
Yes, I think there was some other topics.
In-depth analysis of that hot angle.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, let's see. It says we talked about Night of Champions, Raw, early WrestleMania booking, Global Force Wrestling. Well, Global Force Wrestling make anybody laugh.
That's probably where it happened.
Yeah, exactly, among some other stuff. So, let's see. CRZ. Dr. G joined us. Episode 22. We were talking about the network and its issues. So Dr. G made an appearance on the main event. JD, you're obviously we goof, but you're critical of some things WWE. What do you think has indie wrestling kind of caught up a little bit in the last 4.5 years?
Yeah, definitely it has. It's something I was trying to think as Nate and Steve were both sharing. I listen to a podcast, and I don't listen to very many of the financial podcasts, so I can't remember exactly who it was because I don't normally listen to them, and it just wound up on my feed. And they're discussing how WWE signs so many people, and in the past, I think that's a fear. If you're an independent wrestling fan, to see those guys get signed and snatched away by WWE, there's a fear. Not even the fear, they're not going to use them right, which people have, but if they take too many of the guys from the indie scene, it hurts the indie scene, right? But the way this guy described it is WWE is seeing growth, but independent companies are even on a faster rate of growth than WWE is. So WWE taking their talents isn't really derailing anyone because there's so much good wrestling, there's so many good wrestlers, and I think the biggest thing that we've seen over the past few years, I'll own the fact that I'm critical of WWE. It's just really not a product I think that caters to me anymore, I'm not a guy that wants the moments. I want the stories and the feuds that lead to the moments, and we just don't get that a lot in WWE. But more than anything, I think it's easier to still be a wrestling fan and not have to watch WWE if you don't want to anymore. I can watch New Japan with ease, Ring of Honor with ease, Evolve fairly with ease, and those are just the promotions that jump to my head. New Japan's on a cable channel here that a lot of American households have. I think it's easier to find other stuff probably than it's ever been, and I think that's only good for wrestling if stuff is accessible. Because even though, in the past when I would trumpet, Japan or other things and try to get people to watch it, I understood the response of, yeah, but I don't have that type of money, or I don't have that avenue or that resource. I got that, but I don't think that's really a thing anymore, because wrestling's accessible now more than ever before. And it's a perfect time for it to be accessible because, like Nate said, it might be better than it's ever been. Having a good match is really not a unique thing anymore.
Yep.
I mean, just about every company out there, even the companies we trash like Impact, you can watch Impact tonight and there will be a good match. I won't say every match will be good. You'll find a good match. Good wrestling is abundant, and we're almost...
that three-way with Pentagon, Phoenix, and Austin Aries was as good as anything I saw in any company last week.
Right. And it's almost, there's so much of it that we just regurgitate, like chew it up and spit it out and on to the next great match, But I think it's a great time to be a fan, and you don't have to be a fan of one company, because if you don't like what the big company's doing, there's other companies that will cater to your needs, and they're not hard to find anymore, which I think is the biggest difference we've seen, even in 4 years, which doesn't seem like a long time, but a lot has changed in that short time period.
And of course, all these other promotions have gotten a couple anyway have gotten their own on demands. Obviously, Impact has it on demand now. Of course, we have New Japan World.
Ring of Honor has Honor Club.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Fight Network uses. I don't know if it's changed since last year because of their association with Impact, but I remember House of Hardcore used to be on Fight Network.
Well, according to the Steelers Twitter, breaking news here, boys. The Steelers have traded Martavis Bryant to Oakland.
Wow.
Interesting. He was only a rookie, right?
Yeah, because the Raiders lost.
I was gonna say, he did not like being in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
He was probably in Pittsburgh the night of the Royal Rumble when Daniel Bryan should have won. So.
Yes.
Bringing us back to episode 1 or 2.
Brings it all the way back to the beginning, yeah.
Let's see. Jason Greenhouse made his main event debut at episode 24, so we can add that name there. Let's see. Will came back for episode 25. That's when we turned the clock to 2015. The Core 4. Aaron George came back. Greeny came back. Reese, what do you think? What do you think of other promotions evolving over the past 4.5 years to try to catch up to WWE?
I basically echo what Jordan was saying, where the accessibility has become just so much easier due to digital streaming and all the different services, and there's so many of them that I can't even name all of them for all the different ones.
Right.
And like he said, like the quality of work, I think Nate mentioned this too, like the quality of work is like so good. Like it gets to a point even when you're watching WWE where like you can watch a very good match on one of these streaming services on one of these smaller promotions and you don't even blink an eye anymore. Whereas if you had seen that a decade ago, people would have been throwing 5 or 6 stars at it, and it's just, it's not necessarily that, we become desensitized to the really good wrestling because we see so much of it on the independent scene. It's just that it's so much more readily available to people. I mean, like even Lucha Underground on Netflix, like it's hard for me to even catch up to Lucha Underground, and they have some great stuff, and now they just did the recent collaboration with Impact. The one thing I still ask myself about that whole thing is, are we getting more eyeballs on that product, on the wrestling product, or is it the same set of eyeballs and you're just diving deeper into the niche of the hardcore wrestling fans who are just consuming everything? And I'm not sure where it is. It might be somewhere in between where they are gaining more fans. You're getting more inspiration for some of these younger wrestlers because they see more of the wrestling. They want to be wrestlers, including the women, which, by the way, has become a huge improvement over the last 4 years since we did the show. Women's wrestling has not only expanded in terms of work rate, but become much more popular in the mainstream. But I wonder how much of it is truly expanding the audience to where you notice a sort of a boom or an increase, or have they become much better at marketing towards that niche and making them go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of wrestling?
I think it's a little bit of both, because if you like, I recently attended a WWE house show in Hampton, and yes, you've got your hardcores there, but you also have a lot of kids, and us grumpy old men and listeners who are probably in that same boat can kind of turn up our nose at the quote-unquote PG-ness of a company like WWE, but it makes sense because they're growing a fan base. And I think you've got a little bit of both when you talk about the hardcores, the niche people who will be there for wrestling week in and week out, regardless of how much they bitch and moan about it online. That contingency is always going to be there. And now they're not just getting served. In some cases, they're getting overserved. But I think you're also bringing in more kids. You're bringing in more women. You talk about the advent or the advancements that women's wrestling has made over the past 4 or 5 years. I think you're bringing more women in. I think it's becoming something that I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's cool, but in an age where people are embracing their nerd or geek side, we talk about Infinity War. That's going to be one of the biggest things in entertainment this year. And 10 or 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that's something like, oh, that's a comic book thing. Let's relegate that to this little cadre of geekiness. And so I think people are kind of indulging in their whatever their nerdy passion is, whether it be wrestling,
a sense of empowerment.
Yeah, it's you can be proud now of your wrestling fandom, whereas I think maybe 10 years ago that would not be something that a fan would just boldly like, hey, I watch wrestling. I'll wear a wrestling T-shirt to work on Casual Friday. That's not something I think you'd see. But now I feel wrestling is, if not cool, more accepted.
I actually wear one almost every Friday, actually. Well, then again, the network is in my building, so it doesn't hurt. So episode 30 was the infamous WrestleMania 31 preview with the aforementioned Mr. Sitterson. And
that was my last one for a while. Yeah,
I went to China to avoid that episode.
Yes. However,
I remember exactly where I was to the inch during that episode.
It was me, Reish, Ben, who was probably under his bed during this episode, Will, and then Aubrey.
The first Infinity War.
However, yeah, exactly.
I did call that Seth Rollins was going to cash in. I did call it.
However, episode 31...
No one heard you.
Episode 31 was actually a huge upgrade because we had two guests making their main event debuts in episode 31. One of them was actually my PIC. Mr. Rizzero made his main event. I think it's his only appearance. He might have been on one other one. And The Godfather, Nate Milton, episode 31, my brother.
Now it's a main event.
Now the main event begins.
I'm pretty convinced Justin only went on that show to talk about the Rusev Tank entrance.
Pretty much. That's pretty much what he did.
He thought it was a love podcast for the main event, the Andre Hogan special.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, guys,
I think my main contribution on that episode was arguing with Scotty about how his boy did Sting in that night.
Yes, I know. We did have I can't believe you're still here. Because obviously I won the argument because he was.
And then we shook hands afterwards because that's what adversaries do, and all of a sudden we're friends again.
Exactly. It's just like they did. Exactly. And before we go to break, we obviously need to hear the fourth voice. That is the Epic Core 4. He could not join us this evening, but we are breaking the fourth wall and going back in time. He is the former purveyor of Marvel.com. He's been on actually main event lately after a long and torturous absence, but he has returned. He's still my favorite person on the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, the final cog of the wheel that has been the first 100 episodes of the main event, Mr. Ben Morse.
Da-da-da-da. That's all I got. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Benjamin, always a pleasure, sir. And you know what's funny?
Always a pleasure to be here.
And what's funny is I'm looking back at the description of episode 1, which, as I mentioned earlier, the first episode dropped on our site January 24th, 2014.
My birthday.
That's right. And
yeah.
On that episode, if you remember, I accidentally called you Steve.
Yep. I do remember that.
Ben Steve Morse.
And I've been waiting this whole time for my revenge.
For me to call Steve Willie Ben?
Yeah. No, I remember that well. I remember being called Steve on the first episode. I remember what an honor it was to be asked to be part of Main Event when you and JT and the gang were first starting kind of the Place to Be Nation expansion, the idea of doing other shows beyond the main podcast, to be considered to be one of the regular panelists on basically our version of like when they did Primetime back when they had the panel.
Right.
To be on our version of that was huge for me because, I'd come in as a fan and I'd only been on a few episodes of the main show, but, I loved doing the show. I loved everyone except for Jordan.
Well, that's everybody's opinion.
Nah. Jordan's great too. But it was a lot of fun. Those early days of Main Event were very interesting when it was the solid core four.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, we had a great. I mean, I was very particular in who I wanted to be on this roundtable to begin, and I thought we've always had great chemistry, the five of us. We have different kinds of personalities, and I think that always worked out in our favor. Let me ask you this: as we're now we're about almost 4.5 years old now as a show.
Right.
What has evolved in the business? I asked the guys this earlier. I'll ask you now. How has the business evolved or changed since our first show in January of 2014?
I'll go a little bit educational here, and I am now a professor at UNLV, and I teach social media and public relations. And one of the big things that I've looked at over my first semester as a teacher is how the world and business and everything has changed as a result of social media. And I would say the wrestling business is no exception. I think social media is the big thing that has altered the business in the last 4.5 years is a pretty good period because I feel like that's when Twitter, Instagram, Facebook really became kind of in vogue. They existed before then, but I think they've really taken off in the last few years. And what they've done to the world of industry is they've made every business exist in a much smaller environment. And what I mean by that is that there is now instant feedback for everything. And there's two-way conversations going on. And as a result, businesses cannot take advantage of customers in the way they might have in the past, which I think is great. And it's one of the reasons I like teaching social media because I think it's a good thing for the consumer. As far as wrestling goes, the fans have always been very vocal, and the fans have always been able to kind of express their feedback immediately. That's just the nature of all wrestling, especially WWE, WWF. And, Vince McMahon has always claimed to listen to the fans. But I think if you look at the last few years, the trials of Roman Reigns, the rise and fall and rise of Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, I guess, left. Was that within our window of 4.5 years?
Oh, yeah, because he left right after the Rumble. The night after the Rumble, he left. And all that stuff. I think the idea that you can now connect with any wrestling personality through digital media, right on up to Vince McMahon himself. I'm 99% sure that Vince McMahon does not actually run his own Twitter or check his own Twitter. But there's at least that illusion of the fact you can get in touch with these people, these giants who are creating the wrestling industry. And I think you don't see it better than with your favorite with Triple H, who I think is very social media savvy, goes on Facebook Live all the time, and is very in tune with what the fans want. I think you see it in NXT, you see it
Cruiserweight Classic, the Mae Young Invitational. And I think that, I mean, I'm being very long-winded about it, but I'm the only one here to talk, so I can do that. But basically, you've seen, much like the entertainment industry, the car industry, every industry has become more customer-friendly as a result of social media, as a result of the world becoming a closer-knit place. I think you've seen the same thing in WWE. Even though we all, and I'm not going to get into a long Roman Reigns discussion, but as much as people complain that the Roman Reigns of the world are being shoved down their throats, look at how much cool stuff you have. I mean, think back to when we were younger, Scott, and, we had really, like, you could watch Superstars or you could watch WCW Saturday Night. That was it. Like, you didn't have dozens of initiatives being designed just to please you as a fan. Look at like the UK tournament, or look at any of the specials they put on the network. It's such a fan-driven business. Look at Access, for Christ's sake.
Oh yeah.
I mean, look at these dreams that we as kids or as young adults couldn't even imagine.
Right.
And when you look at the last 4.5 years as kind of the window of change, I think even within that time, look at all the cool stuff that has happened within the last few years. So I think it's a great time to be a fan. I think the business has evolved to be much more friendly to the audience. And I think it's only going to go up from here. Of course, the danger, as always, is you can't let customers control the product. You can't let them dictate every decision you make. That's something I ran into a lot when I was at Marvel. We didn't want to, just because, for example, we made Thor a woman and we thought it was a great story. And of course, a loud majority of people were outraged. Thor's a man. How can you do this? And if we had listened to social media, we would have immediately gone back on that decision. And instead, Marvel stood its ground. And I think it was ultimately a good decision. So now WWE is going to have to learn. And I think they still are learning. I think some have a better grasp than others, but they're going to have to learn. They've spent years listening to the audience in a way. Like Vince McMahon could listen to cheers and boos and kind of slowly go about his thought process. Now, in a world where we expect instant feedback and instant gratification, WWE is going to have to walk that dangerous line between being fan-friendly and letting the fans dictate their every move.
Well, that's what happened in 2014. They dictated their every move. It was obviously, the fact that Daniel Bryan was not in their plans, and we kind of made them put him in their plans. And then you saw 1 year later in 2015, after he was in that Royal Rumble, the Royal Rumble that I was at in Philly when Roman won the first time, or won his, and the fans were trying to will them to do it again, and this time Vince is like, no. Fool me once. What is it? Fool me once,
shame on me.
Shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. And I think that was the philosophy in 2015. All right, you guys got your fun last year. I have plans, and that's that. And so I definitely think that accessibility has changed and has evolved in the last 4.5 years. I also think that all the products have leveled out. In 2014, Impact / TNA was a little bit hotter. I mean, I remember watching. I was on our website and on our message board pre PlayStation Nation. I had done the Impact reviews, and I remember Impact was still very hot. AJ was obviously still there, Bully Ray and Aces and Eights, and guys were still kind of hot there, and then there was that stinker of a Bound for Glory, and then by 2014 they went back to struggling. I feel like Ring of Honor has been kind of steady. They haven't been fantastic, but they never suck. WWE has obviously gained an influx of talent and has, changed things up, and we now have the mega-length WrestleManias that started, 2 years ago in Arlington.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you that I think the intimacy, I guess you could say, of
good word,
of fans to superstars has definitely gotten closer in the last couple of years and since Main Event started. And I think that that's going to continue because particularly with overseas and guys moving around and girls moving around, and WWE has more social media access than ever, and they have more crossover stars than ever, not only with Brock, but obviously with Ronda, who opens things up for other possibilities. Anything that has happened in the last 4.5 years that if I asked you 4.5 years ago if this happened, you'd have been like, you're out of your mind. Like, has anything shocked you in the business since 2004?
You just mentioned it, like in a roundabout way, when you said guys and then instantly corrected yourself and said and girls. I think that's been the most surprising thing in the last 4.5 years is just how big women's wrestling has become in WWE. I think there was always the expectations that there was some great stuff going on in NXT, starting with Paige and Emma, going to the Four Horsewomen, the idea that there could be quality women's wrestling as part of the biggest company in the world. But I don't think we ever saw it on the level it's at now, where they have their own Royal Rumble that closed the show, where they have a legit crossover superstar in Ronda Rousey, where they have matches like Charlotte, Asuka that legitimately could have main evented WrestleMania if they had wanted to. I think the growth and expansion of women's wrestling is just another example. It's again, I don't care about giving Triple H too much credit because I think he deserves credit, but at the same time, I don't want to give him credit for everything. I do think the Triple H Stephanie team has been somewhat redeemed in the last 5 years. I think they were reviled for so long for all the selfish, immature decisions they made. I think they've matured, and as a result, you've seen so many great things come to the WWE. You've seen all the things I mentioned earlier. You've seen all the great things that Triple H does for the Hall of Fame in terms of mending fences. And I think it's a combination of Triple H and Stephanie's vision and maturity that you've seen, and frankly, just business savvy, that you've seen this growth in women's wrestling. The idea that, look, and again, going back to my Marvel days again, there was always this idea, and this is something Disney went at in the reverse. There's always that idea that you're only appealing to 50% of the fan base. In Marvel's case, it was we had all the boys, but we didn't have the girls. In Disney's case, it was the reverse. They had all the young girls, but they couldn't get any male customers. WWE, similar boat. For years has always appealed to a majority male demographic. So if they want to grow, what's the biggest untapped market for them to hit? It's not China. It's not Saudi Arabia. It's half the fucking planet, which is, women. Mm-hmm. And now they have a legitimate group and a great group of talented, believable, and likable female wrestlers. It's not, the days of every heel is a bitch and every babyface is just kind of a bimbo. Like, they have no characters. Like, right. These girls have fully evolved characters, and they're good wrestlers. And we've seen it trickle down to the indies. There's unfortunately, Impact is kind of a shadow of its former self when it comes to women's wrestling, but they still have, they're still trying. They still have some decent performers. And then Ring of Honor is finally putting some focus on the women. Mm-hmm. And, you look internationally, women's wrestling has always been a big deal. But as far as what surprises me, it takes a lot in wrestling to be surprised.
I agree.
Because it feels like almost anything is at this point. It's like you expect the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
Things like Kurt Angle coming back to WWE feel more inevitable than surprising.
Right.
But the true, not to use their word for it, but it's the right word, the true evolution of women's wrestling is probably the biggest and most welcome surprise for me over the last couple of years.
Okay. All right. We were talking about, earlier with the guys were talking about the some past legendary and fun episodes and some trivia. So here's your question, and you knew I was going to ask you this.
Oh, Jesus.
What episode number was the infamous Aubrey episode?
I have suppressed all memory of that episode. I don't know what number it was. I don't know what year it was. I don't know. I don't know anything else.
I may have to.
The funny thing is, Aubrey has continued to. He stopped his wrestling show, but
I'm
as far
stunned.
as being, huh?
I'm stunned.
Yeah, as far as being an internet personality, social media personality, he's still out there, and he's only gotten more opinionated and crazy in the last few years,
I can't
to the
imagine.
point where if you had him on now, it would probably be even worse. So it's just, it's been interesting to follow him. But no, I don't remember the episode number. I don't remember anything about it.
It was, I can't believe how far back this was. It was episode 30.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was like 70.
Yeah, I did too. It seemed like it was much more recent.
It was actually, and I thought, when I first thought about it, I'm like, oh, it had to have been some throwaway episode. It was actually our WrestleMania 30.
Yeah, it was a WrestleMania preview because do you remember what the first, I said I don't remember, but I do remember every excruciating moment of it. Do you remember what the first thing that set off kind of triggers was? Because I remember exactly what it was.
Was it Taker? Did I have to do with Taker? No.
Nope. It was. Do you want to guess? Or
Yeah,
you want
go
me to
ahead.
tell you what
No,
it
go
is?
ahead. Go ahead.
It was talking about the Bushwhackers going into the Hall of Fame.
Oh, yes.
Because everyone was like,
Will,
"Oh
of
yeah,"
course, exactly. He's going on his whole sheepherder's kick, right?
Everyone was like, "Oh yeah, they were goofy, they were fun, whatever." And then, no, it was the reverse of that. It was everyone was saying like, "Oh, I wish we could get more acknowledgement of them as the sheepherders. I wish we could learn more about their violent past." And then Aubrey was kind of like, "No, I like them as like the goofy WWF, just like goofballs." And it wasn't like a huge rift, but you could just tell that it was like storm clouds forming. It was just like, oh man, this is going to be a rough episode. Because we couldn't even get through the fucking Bushwhackers without having like people being pissed off. So when we spent like 20 minutes talking about the Bushwhackers, I knew things were going to get bad.
That is true.
Yep.
Oh my god. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, what's funny about that? What a guest upgrade, because the following episode 31, was the Godfather Nate Milton's debut.
Oh wow! Yeah, legendary.
So there you go. We've had some other good moments. There's an episode I got to look it up. We were talking about it earlier. There was an episode we were doing. It had to have been in the 20s. I feel like we were talking about No Mercy or October pay-per-views, and something happened, and we all lost it. There was one moment where literally all five of us, you, me, Reish, JD, and Steve, just lost our minds, and I can't remember what it was about. I gotta look it up. But it has been some run, and we've had some shows come and go, and I'm pretty proud. I mean, obviously JR and I are at 484 right now.
Yeah, you guys are unstoppable. You're the gold standard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty proud, and Hard Traveling Fanboys just hit 100. So
I'm not really a comics fan, so I don't.
Yeah,
I've not familiar with them.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah, they're all right. They're usually drunk. No, but what sucks is we didn't really know you when WrestleMania 29 was at MetLife. Now,
true, yeah.
This coming year, it'll be back at MetLife. You don't even fucking live here anymore.
I know. I joked about it with my wife. It's like, it's like what do you call it? It's like an automatic reaction. Like when they announced that it was going to be at MetLife, I got excited for a second.
Yeah.
And then I had to remind myself that I live in Las Vegas now. So I probably won't be going there. Yeah. I mean, I had a good run of going to Manias there for a little while because I went to MetLife, I went to 29, I went to 30 in New Orleans, and then I went to 32 in Arlington. So 3 and 4 years, that was a pretty good run.
That is good. Yep.
This year, watched it at home. I got to watch it with my daughter for the first time though, so that was pretty cool.
And awesome.
It was so cool. She had because we got her a little. I got her a little Bailey onesie for Christmas, and that was the first time she wore it. So it was me in my New Japan shirt, Hazel in her Bailey onesie, and then my wife was wearing a Becky Lynch T-shirt, and
awesome.
We just watched as a family, and it was pretty cool. So I don't know how many live WrestleManias I'll be going to in the future, and I'm definitely regretting I won't get to hang out with you guys at MetLife unless something miraculous happens.
I always dream.
Yeah, but no, I'm in a new phase of my wrestling fandom where I get to kind of share it with my family. So
awesome.
that's like my new version of getting to go to shows live. Although I did get to go to Elimination Chamber, so that was cool.
Well, I'll tell you something. I will come to you then.
Yeah,
because
you're always welcome. There's always a spot for you.
Because I guarantee you that let me say this again. That once it's built,
yeah,
there will be a Mania at the Raiders football stadium.
100%. But I'm not waiting for that. I have already begun a campaign on Twitter. As a former New York, New Jersey resident, I think it's absurd that New York is going to get both WrestleMania and SummerSlam in 1 year. So I have started the petition to get SummerSlam in Vegas.
Count me in.
Yeah, I will not rest until justice is served and delivered.
No, you count me in. I'm all in for that. I have no problem.
Would that be fun? Everyone can come to Vegas for the weekend, hang out, people crash at my house, and then go to SummerSlam. I mean, look, it's great that it's been in Brooklyn for 25 years now, and that's always a fun weekend. But I think it's time to give the West Coast some love. Don't move it back to the Staples Center. Put it at put it here where the Knights play, and make it an experience. The entertainment capital of the world. So WWE belongs here for a major event.
I agree. I mean, it was just there for what was it? The Chamber, because you were there, the Elimination Chamber. So no, I definitely think you'll see once Vince sits back and sees the great run that the Golden Knights are on right now.
Oh my God, it's insane
that they've advanced to the conference semifinals, and the Raiders head in there soon. You could definitely see that Vince will start to, and Hunter and them will start to push things over to the West Coast.
It's my fervent hope to see a Golden Knights Bruins final. So I can be in another can't lose situation. Dream, but we'll see.
Now I may come see it just for that. Now you got me excited.
Yeah.
Now that the Bruins have, survived that the Game 7 with Toronto and they're moving on to play Tampa, I'm like, I never even realized that you living there now has opened up immense possibilities. And we have other Vegas Vegas. I don't want to say Vegas transplants, East Coast transplants besides you that are in Vegas. So
sure, there's a whole crew.
The whole crew. So I'm pumped. I mean, don't forget. Now, how far is? Again, I always do this on Place B podcast. Try to guess where one city is, and I always fuck it up. But, I mean, Phoenix isn't that far away from you, right? What's Phoenix like on a plane?
A couple hours.
Because don't forget the Rumble's at Chase. Next
year.
Oh,
is it?
Yeah, Rumble's at Chase Field in Phoenix next year.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So.
Could be a little trip.
Anyway, Benji, you were always the man, and you are still my favorite person on the planet.
Thanks, Scotty. It's right back at you. I
know.
feel the same way.
And Steve Willie misses you more than life itself.
Yeah.
But we know you'll be back, of course. It just didn't work out that we were able to be on the same show this week. But Ben will always be back, folks. The door's always open for him. He'll come and we'll do some more analysis and talk some sheep herders.
Yeah. No, I love it's one of the nice things about my new job. Is it allows me a lot more free time and flexibility. So, and also being in a different time zone than you guys works it out nicely so that I can do a main event with you guys and then still get off the computer, and it's still relatively early, so I can still spend some time with my family.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I hope to be on many more main events, and happy 100 to you, Scott, and to Nate and to everyone else. It's a great show, and I'm glad to have been a part of it.
You will always be a part of it. Ben Morse, everyone, my favorite person on the planet. More of episode 100 of the main event after this.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, which of course includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlayStation.com, and we offer those to you on 3 great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we bring you the Mothership, the original Place to Be podcast, as well as Main Event, Lucha Afterground, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction shows, as well as the Our Vantage Point podcast and Jeff Learns Wrestling. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver quick-hit pod blasts on topics old and new.
Over on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, we dive deep inside the wrestling business with a stacked army of experts leading the way. The feed features potpourri shows such as This Week in Wrestling, Greetings from Allentown, Psychology is Dead, Puro Potpourri, Stacy and Elliot's Bogus Journey, and the Military Industrial Suplex. We also have shows that focus intently on certain topics like Letters from Center Stage, Space City, and NWA Classics on Demand Adventure, Through the Years, Strong Style History, Strong Style Story, and Mount Olympus. Plus, the feed has the full archives of legendary shows like Titans of Wrestling, Where the Big Boys Play, Letters from Kayfabe, and much more. And on our popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, Rank and File, PTBN Dadcast, Go Home in a Box, NBA Team, and Lucha Undead, as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans with the Hard Traveling Fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversation, Geek and Sassy, and Imaginary Stories podcasts.
You can find all of these current shows plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to all of our feeds on iTunes, and while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows, plus others, available on PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when shopping online, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Bonehead's Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, TheHistoryOfWrestling.com, and Scott Keats' Blog of Doom. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, it is me, the manager, Todd Weber, and I'm here to tell you all about a brand new show on the PTBN Pop feed. It's Talkin' Pop. Each month, hosts Jennifer Smith and Tim Capel discuss the hottest topics in pop culture along with their special guests. Funny, illuminating, and even sometimes a bit naughty, Talkin' Pop is our latest and greatest legendary Place to Be Nation podcast. So be sure to join Jenny and Tim every single month on Talkin' Pop. Proudly part of the PTBN Pop feed on iTunes, Stitcher, and PlaceToBeNation.com. The only place to be in your pop culture world.
2. Is this on? Yo, Jimmy, hit me with that Triple H. Yeah, you let the music keep playing, Mr. Dumb. Yo, tell me whose time it is now. Yeah, just kicking it up here. Sometime, yo, here comes trouble. Not gonna listen to anybody. Tell me who and what to be. Not trying to be like everybody. Time to play make believe. 'Cause I'm the
We are back on episode 100 of Place to Be Nation's main event. The Godfather, Scotty, Steve Willie, and the rest of the assembled crew here. We've got our Sunday best on a Thursday night. So we got JD in here looking draft pick sharp, and Reese, who's I don't know why, but for whatever reason he is wearing an NWO Hollywood shirt. So we'll see what that's all about.
There's a Wolfpack one underneath. Don't worry.
With your
okay.
Yes, and his Saints colored boa.
Don't turn your back on the Wolfpack.
That's right. Actually,
but yeah, Scotty, this is a monumental week, and how you feeling? How you holding up?
I'm doing well, brother Nate. I'm doing well. I'm glad I got my core 4 with us. It's good that we can do a nice look back at the last 4.5 years of 100 episodes of Main Event, because I think it's been a great show. I think we've kind of touched on all things. We went through a stretch where we pretty much just did WWE because, of course, you, brother Nate, were on with Mr. Willie and Mr. Rozzero to do clotheslines and headlines. You guys kind of tackled the other corners of the globe, while we here at Main Event kind of handled pretty much just the flamethrower. Episode 33. Ready for this one? Episode 33, we did a draft. It was me, Ben, Reesh.
No kidding.
And
Greg Phillips?
And Brad Stutz.
Oh, Stutz.
Wow.
Stutsy.
So, it was something with like NXT wrestlers or something?
We were just doing a draft. We were drafting a foundation.
Okay.
That's what we were doing. We were drafting a foundation. So, there we go.
That's right.
Episode 34 was the first time I was doing the TNA lesson, so that's the first time we talked about Cheeks and Puppet. So that was a good
wow,
pan
that
pisser.
long ago, huh?
Reese Jordan, yep, that was that one. Yeah, that was June of 15. Greenie, Willie, nope, those guys have been on already. All right, guys. While I'm continuing to build our all-time guest list, all right, now let's talk about speaking of the flamethrower. Let's talk about him. Okay. Now, when the network started, Daniel Bryan was being politicked by the IWC to be in the main event at WrestleMania. CM Punk left. Things were a little choppy. And we were about to have a WrestleMania at the Superdome, or the Silverdome. 4.5 years later, we just had another WrestleMania at the Superdome. How about that for book ending?
Woohoo!
I'll start with you, JD, because obviously you have your pluses and minuses with the flamethrower at the moment. Talk about the roster in general, just overall the roster. Has it gotten better or worse since 2014? Just the main roster, NXT. We'll talk about NXT separately.
My gut reaction is better because I'm sitting here thinking, who's there? AJ Styles is there. The women's division, much better. Daniel Bryan's still there. You've got Owens, you've got Zayn, you've got, Brock's still around. Maybe he shouldn't be anymore, but my gut reaction is that it's better. As I sit and think about it, I'm trying to think of who's around now that wasn't at WrestleMania 30. Braun might be the biggest plus. Imagine that, Braun Strowman. Here's a guy that we all crapped on, because he really did suck for a while. And now he's the guy that we're all like, he should have been the one in the main event of WrestleMania. So I think the roster's gotten better. I don't know that it's significantly better because compared to WrestleMania 30, which was a really darn good show. But yeah, I would say it's better.
What do you think, Steve?
Well, I'm glad you asked me this, Scott, because I pulled a Criscolo, and I went back and looked at the results from the first show that we did for Main Event and see if there was any wrestling shows on, and in fact there was. Oh. There was a SmackDown on January 24th. And Scott Criscola, would you like me to read the results?
Of course I would, because I would read it myself. But go ahead. Yes.
Yes.
Please do.
So, and this would give you a good idea of what the roster was like back then, for at least SmackDown. So Rey Mysterio and The Big Show defeated the Real Americans of Cesaro and Swagger with Zeb Coulter in 8:28.
Oh.
The Miz defeated Brodus Clay in 1:48, and that was announced by Bad News Barrett.
Funk is no more on a roll.
No. AJ Lee with Tamina Snuka defeated Cameron with Naomi in 1:28.
Oh, wow.
Sounds great.
Yeah, Ryback and Axel defeated Los Matadores with El Torito in 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Oh, my God.
So we have 4 matches in 3 minutes or under.
That was on the main card at WrestleMania?
No, this is SmackDown for the day.
Jesus. It wasn't that shitty 4 years ago, Nate.
The Matadors got a match before the Usos.
Let's see, Rowan and Harper defeated the primetime players of Young and O'Neal in 1 minute.
Oh, I remember Darren Young.
Yeah. Kofi Kingston defeated Fandango with Summer Rae in 2 minutes and 49 seconds. So that's 5 matches in a row under 3 minutes.
A pre-New Day, Kofi Kingston.
Yeah. And then Big E, Cody Rhodes, Goldust, and the Usos ended in a no contest with the New Age Outlaws. Remember that reunion? Yes. And the Shield. And then everyone came out for the Royal Rumble free-for-all.
Oh my!
So yes, to answer your question, yes, the roster is way better now.
Yeah, I'd like to admit, I said not significantly better. I'd like to change my answer.
Yeah, it was ridiculously better. Oh my God. Well, before we do, I'm going to look back and see who the champions were during the first episode, but I'm going to keep checking. I'm going to keep going through. The Cowboy, Roger Morissette, made his main event debut in episode 42, which was our post-Brooklyn SummerSlam episode in August of 15.
Was Nate on that episode with him?
No. No. Nate was actually on the next episode when we previewed Night of Champions. You were on that one, Brother Nate.
All right.
JD Ben Glenny. Let's see. I had. Oh, look at this. Episode 45. Ready for this one? All 4 of you were not on. We previewed Survivor Series and remembered the passing of Nick Bockwinkel. So you ready for this trio?
Mm-hmm.
It was me, Will, and Sorrow.
Oh, man.
So you had a reaction show.
Yeah, exactly. A reaction to death.
So that's the episode with the most live belches that was in main event
belches,
history.
Children, and roach clips.
You have to hide the fish oil for that one.
Then Graham came back for the year in review. Let's see, who previewed the Rumble? JD and... one with just JD and Nate. Let's see, JD... That's why you got fired, because
that was the best episode we ever did.
Exactly, yes. We previewed the Rumble.
So this is 16 now, right?
Yeah, now we're into 2016, episode 48, Fastlane. Mr. D'Amato made his debut at episode 49. Fastlane. I got to read this one. Fastlane recap, Raw, and the Fan Manifesto. What was that? Was that when I probably trashed people for being assholes?
Yes.
Likely.
Yeah, that was when you shot hard on the bourgeois.
On the bourgeois.
Well, I think that was a response to. Wasn't there like a fan manifesto online?
Yeah, you have to respect the taker and all this other stuff.
Yes, that's
and
right.
Raw was in Chicago.
I thought it was something Scott made up because he was mad that everyone was booing Triple H being the champion.
I didn't care. I just loaded up. I just trolled Facebook with pictures. It was the best part. That was actually, and then we did a 50th episode. Listen to this description of episode 50. Main event has reached its 50th episode, and to mark the occasion, Scott has brought back the core 4, and JD is late for the first time in a while to look back.
I was not pregnant though.
Exactly. To look back at some of the memories. So there's episode 50. Let's see, 51. Do we debut anybody? Oh yes. Let's see, Glenn. This was the WrestleMania 32 preview. Was episode 51. So halfway through the show, that makes sense. 50 episodes in, and we were 2 years old, because episode 51 was WrestleMania 32 preview. So that makes sense. I guess 25 episodes. Well, I guess it makes sense every other year, I guess. That was actually Andy Helene made his debut. So put his name down.
Oh, my boy Andy.
Andy Helene made his debut at episode 51.
Yeah, boy, Andy.
Reesh, what do you think about the roster since our episode 1 to now?
Well, the thing is, like, when Steve was mentioning SmackDown, I mean, obviously, they were still kind of somewhat separating Raw and SmackDown, but that's mostly the same crew. So you can basically take that for face value what the roster was. Absolutely, it's better. Like, they've been able to just expand the number of wrestlers. I already mentioned, NXT on the network. And NXT is so loaded that they have very good independent wrestlers they've signed that they just don't even have room for. So they literally had to move up guys like No Way Jose and, girls like Billie Kay and Peyton Royce because they literally just did not have spots for them at NXT. That's how loaded, like, their roster is. They had to get their feeder system, and they had to push people out of the feeder system and get them onto the main roster because they didn't have enough spots. The main roster is kind of weird because the talent is more and more. I remember me and Ben Morris did a piece about this like right about 4 or 5 years ago where we said, we really need to go back to a brand extension again because I think the talent level is sort of ballooning again. And they eventually did that, in 2016, which is right around this time where you're chronicling the show. But and to be fair, I think that the talent has expanded even more since the brand extension a year or so ago. Like, it's gotten even better, especially with Daniel Bryan returning and, all the signees that they get out of the independent scene, like Ricochet, and then, and then their imports, like, or their in-house talent, like Braun Strowman. And I think
Nicholas.
Yeah, and Nicholas, who unfortunately tested positive for Flintstone vitamins. Which I stole that joke from the guy who did recap the WrestleMania show with you guys because I thought it was so good. But the only thing that kind of upsets me sometimes with WWE and the fact that they have such a great roster is that they still have these big time shows like WrestleMania, which was an enjoyable show, but it just always felt like they could do more, but they just have so much. And I think this is the problem with wrestling in general now. There's so much of it, you don't even know where to start. Like, yeah. I wish sometimes you had more of those situations like 2014 where you knew where your bread and butter was, and you could just focus in on that and hone in on it and make something great. And I think for all the non-NXT portions of WWE, that's a problem for them because there's too many hands to feed. And it's a good problem to have because you'll never have a bad match. Like WrestleMania 34 doesn't really have any bad matches. It's just that they didn't really have one main focus of like, this is the match we're going to like ride on to carry the show. Because they're not in that, truthfully, they're not in that position anymore.
Right.
And it's a comforting thing. But it's also kind of a sad thing because it sort of gets away from how wrestling used to be.
Yeah, I would concur with that. What do you think, Nate?
I mean, I don't think it's any question that the roster, in general, from top to bottom, from NXT to Raw, is better. When you talk about a company that now has AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and Nakamura under their roof, just those three guys alone is an increase in your talent. The women, like, the talent in the women compared to the divas of 4 years ago, it's night and day. When now you're like the worst wrestler or the worst in-ring competitor now would probably be the best girl back then. And I'm probably thinking about somebody like a Carmella who is like she's okay in the ring, but she's not great. She's not Asuka or Charlotte or anybody like that. But compared to those girls back in the day, and it's crazy that 4 years ago was back in the day. But compared to 4 years ago, she's head and shoulders above a lot of those girls.
Oh, yeah.
I think when you look at NXT and, dare I say it, NXT NA, and that Impact Wrestling influence, when you got people like Eric Young, people like Drew McIntyre, people like Samoa Joe, who I mentioned earlier, Bobby Roode coming through, where you got people in your developmental territory that are already developed. The Hardys, yeah. We got people that are already developed when they come to NXT, so they don't need to learn how to wrestle. They just need to be fit into your WWE universe, quote unquote. So I just think the talent is so abundant these days when you look at the indies, and like I think that's probably why it doesn't hurt as much when guys get caught up to NXT or when guys get signed to NXT, because there's a chance that they may go on and do something great. But even if they flop and flame out in NXT, they can still command top dollar on the indies. And I think that's something that we didn't see 4 years ago because the indies just weren't as strong. So yeah, the roster are better, but I think that's maybe less a WWE specific thing and more the idea that wrestling in general is better and there are better workers out there who need places to work.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fitting that episode 52 was called the Post-WrestleMania Hangover, and that was actually Nick Duke's debut episode. That's fitting. That makes sense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Nick Duke and Steve Riddle made their debuts, so that's two more names.
Is that Steve Willie's evil counterpart, Steve Riddle?
Steve the Riddle.
Yes.
Riddle me this, riddle me that.
Yes.
Riddle's blood sport.
Why is Steve wearing a jacket with all those question marks on it?
Oh,
You trying to teach me about patents?
We had a southern-tinged episode 55. It was me, Chad, and Chris Zellner. Wow.
My
Yankee accent came through there.
Twitter fiend.
Has that episode ended yet?
I know, right? No, Bix hasn't read any obituaries yet, so or accident reports. Let's see. Now, Nate, you came on episode 57. We did a mock draft preview. Brian Bayless made his debut that night. There's another name, and you came on as well, and we did a mock draft. But obviously, you were just you at the time. You were a guest still because Clotheslines and Headlines was still going on. Let's see. Glenn and Steve came on that episode. All right, so let's talk about a main guy. Let's talk about a few individual guys, and they're evolving from when we started in January of 14 to now. And the first one I really want to talk about is Roman Reigns, who obviously has been on a roller coaster in 4.5 years. JD, what has happened to Roman Reigns in the last 4.5 years?
That's a loaded question.
That's why I gave it to him.
This is like I'm one of the guys. I don't want to let myself in as one of those Roman haters because I don't think he's the worst thing in the world or anything like that. But I'm not really a fan of his, and this is maybe why I'm not really a fan. You say what's happened to him in the last 4 years? Nothing. You know what I mean? I think he was a good wrestler then. I think he's a good wrestler now. I don't think his promo skills have really improved. Maybe they let him change his style here or there, but I think the Roman Reigns that we saw at WrestleMania 30 was very, very, very similar to the Roman Reigns we get at WrestleMania 34. And I think that's maybe, as a guy who doesn't really have any investment in him, I think that's why there really hasn't been much change in terms of the character. Obviously, in terms of his booking and his career, how many roller coasters do we want to go on? He's seen ups, he's seen downs, he's seen very, very, very lows, and some very, very, very highs. But I think that's maybe my issue, my sticking point with the guy is that nothing really does change about him. He's just kind of the same old guy, night in and night out, to his detriment. Or if you're a fan of his, it's a positive. But if you're somebody who doesn't really care, it's detrimental because you're never going to care because nothing's different.
Right. Nate, what do you think about the last 4.5 years of Roman Reigns?
Well, there was a wise man who once said, and I know you'll appreciate this, Scotty, evolution is a mystery full of change that no one sees.
That's right.
And I think that is the perfect description for the last 4 years of Roman Reigns because there have been changes. I think most notably his improvement in the ring from being just a punch kick dude to somebody that can actually go out and have really good matches when he's in there with the right people. And even when he's not, I think some of those matches with Braun that Roman had to kind of be the captain of turned out better than anybody expected. So I think he's improved in the ring. I think that he has improved in terms of what the company wants from him as, somebody that can be a spokesperson. But I think where he's been stuck and stagnant for the last 4 years is the character. And that's not really a fault of Roman Reigns. That, to me, lies more on the booking and on Vince McMahon and what he wants out of his top guy. It's very similar to what John Cena got stuck in for the better part of the past decade. And so, it'd be easy for me to come on and just say, he just needs to, make a heel turn and that would solve everything. And it probably would solve a lot of things, but I don't think it would solve everything because at the end of the day, either Vince McMahon or Roman Reigns has to say, okay, this is not quite working the way we want it to work. So let's tweak some things. And I don't see either one of those things happening. Like, if you're Roman, why would you want to piss off the old man? And if you're Vince, you think you're right. So I don't think either one of those guys are going to, lobby for change. But when you talk about the last 4 years of Roman in general, again, he's not the best guy on the roster, but I think he gets a bad rap from fans who don't even know why they don't like him anymore. It's just because we've had so much of the same thing for 4 years that we want something different. So, Roman's gotten better in the ring, but as far as everything else, the complete package, it has been kind of stale.
Another name, Steve, episode 62, Logan Crosland made his main event debut. Reese, you were actually on a very recent episode, 63. Along with another guy making his debut, Greg Phillips made his debut on that episode. Another new name. So, Reese, what do you think about Roman Reigns from 2014 to now?
Jordan and Nate made good points. The first thing that everybody immediately points to, and it was obviously alluded to a ton when they had that little mini feud with each other in the fall, is John Cena. And, the fact that Cena was booked in this position. Okay, you're the Superman. You're the guy. You're the one who's going to be sort of carrying whatever brand it is that you're on that Vince sees as the premier brand to either be the champion or be like the figurative champion, the one who has to sort of carry the way. The question you might be asking is, has Roman Reigns done a good job of that given the booking he's been sort of the hand he's been dealt with the booking and with the work that he's put in? And I know it's frustrating to say this for people who want a more definitive. The answer is yes and no. Like, his work rate has improved vastly. Like, I can watch the Roman Reigns match now and be very, very entertained. The only problem with Roman, if I had to be super, work rate nitpicky, is that he can't carry a bad wrestler. Like, when he can't take a bad performance out of somebody and make it better. He's a guy that if you give him a good wrestler and you put him up against him, he'll have a very good match. If you put him against a guy who he really works well with, he can have a great match. The problem is, I think Roman Reigns is a victim more. If there's something that he's a victim of more than anything else, it's timing. Like, it's always a situation where, for example, he got the title in, late 15 really because Seth Rollins tore his ACL. Like, was he going to win it anyway going in? Probably, but you're not really sure. But the fact that they had to sort of do an about-face because of Rollins' injury and they had to build this whole, storyline where he was the baby face trying to face off against the Authority, it's really, it just sort of rang hollow, just like everything that Cena had done. We're done with Cena. It's the same old stuff. F you, all this stuff. And I guess for Roman Reigns that we've sort of hit a fatigue mode, but I also do agree, and I think Nate alluded to this, where I think the booking has really let him down. I don't want to be too begrudging about Brock Lesnar because I've had enough hot air blown on the show about it, but I really do think they made the wrong decision there. And some people say, oh, then you're a Roman Reigns defender. It's like, no, I'm a defender of the smart decision. If you want your guy, your figurative guy to be the man going into the next season, then you should just have him go over Brock Lesnar. But they didn't do it. And, he also, there's some things of his own design, like, the failed drug test and some bad, some situations where he could have delivered on a big time match and it just didn't really happen. The Force Shield reunion where they were just trying to basically nudge in some face heat for Roman and the face snuffed that out pretty quickly. Long story short, I feel a little bad for Roman Reigns. I do think some of his wounds are self-inflicted, but overall, how much difference? I feel a little bit more respect for him than I did back then.
I've never hated Roman Reigns. I don't think he's a bad wrestler. As a matter of fact, he's had a lot more good matches than not good matches. Roman doesn't seem to be comfortable in his own skin. Trying to be relaxed and kind of go with the flow. I think it was smart to have him with Cena because
The symbolism.
Yeah, and to he should have used Cena as an example of how to kind of go with the flow and, hey, look, man, if you're getting booed, roll with it. And he didn't let himself roll with it.
Yeah.
And that's and in the long run it ended up being, in my opinion, kind of a big problem for him.
Well, the one night he did, they never went back to it, and that was the night after last year's WrestleMania
when he said, "This is my yard now." Yeah.
And they never really went back to that.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Yep.
That was a mistake. I agree with that. Steve, what do you think?
I think, and obviously listeners can't see this, but I just sent you guys, some pictures of what Roman Reigns looked like in 2014 and what he looks like now, and it's exactly the same except some red on his suit instead of some all black. And I think that's just, that him in a nutshell. And I have nothing against Roman Reigns. I was cheering for him at Mania to win, and I think if you're looking at current Roman Reigns, I think that there's starting to be more people coming around who are like, you know what?
Yes.
He is here all the time. He is busting his ass. And, and having great matches, like you said, Scott, more often than not. But there is that staleness just to the character. Like, I can't, and this is completely unscientific. I've not gone back, in these last couple of minutes and looked at pictures of people from 2014 to now. But, outside of maybe John Cena, you've seen character changes. I mean, look how many different characters Jericho has had it in that time. Anytime he comes back, he, does a different character, tweaks stuff a little bit. And I don't know what you can do with them. Maybe it is Vince McMahon not wanting to, turn off the money machine. And he does make money. So why change something that's not broken? I mentioned the person I was working with before. He's happy. Kids are happy. He's getting cheered. The booze, as I've talked about before, is a lot of times is more groupthink than anything. It's cold takes from 2016 or 2017, and so people think they got to continue it. But they are going to have to do something in the next year or so, probably, to freshen him out, because who else can he fight at this point? He's pretty much fought everybody. He might need some time off because he's been on every week, except for the few weeks of the suspension. So I guess in my circles speak, what I'm doing right now is saying, yeah, he's very much stale, but he's been coming around over the last year and a half.
I think he has too. Episode 68, Steve, Chris Jordan made his debut. Now, actually, I have to actually listen to. So, I'll listen to it later. But episode 76, which was last year's NXT Takeover Chicago, and the Backlash preview, it says Scott's with Greeny, Chris Jordan, and a PTB are making his main event debut. I'm curious who that is.
Too many.
Yeah, really. I can't even guess. To be honest.
So many things are.
Who's the third man, Tony?
It was Steve Bennett. Steve Bennett, yes.
Steve Bennett. Oh God. Let me ask you this.
You guys talk about the Karate Kid a lot on that one.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys talk about the Karate Kid.
Talk about the Karate Kid.
And Chris Jordan, is that Kurt Angle's other son?
He wishes.
It's Jason's brother.
Jason's brother, Chris.
Yep. Chris Jordan, good guy. Of course, he just finished his.
He's gonna attack. He's gonna be attacking Chad Gable on Raw soon.
He wishes. Chad Gable wishes. If I said to you, Nate, that when you, by the way, episode 77 is when you came on as my co-host. So it's been 20. This is your 23rd episode. This is our 23rd episode together. So here we go. So we'll have our own little party at episode 102 when it's 25.
Can I come?
What?
Can I come?
Yeah, you can. Of course you can. You could bring the
Thanks.
You could bring the Kool-Aid. Nate, if I said to you 4 years ago that AJ Styles is coming to WWE, would you have thought I was nuts?
I wouldn't have thought you were nuts. Now, if you finish that statement by saying, and he would be one of the top guys, yes, I would have to get you checked out.
I need to be checked out anyway.
Anyway, because like I had a feeling eventually that was the game plan, but I had no idea he would be used as effectively as he's been used, and there were times even in the early run when I was nervous because if you remember that post Rumble debut where they tried to get the Pitbull thing over, and much like Fetch on Mean Girls, it was never going to happen. Like they focused on him being small and Southern, and he was a pit bull, and I was like, this is how they're gonna ruin AJ Styles. And then he lost to Jericho at WrestleMania. Like, here comes the ruination of AJ Styles. But between that Jericho loss and today, they righted the ship. I think he really started taking off when they first paired him up with Gallows and Anderson. And once you get this man in the ring, it's like he doesn't have to be the greatest promo in the world, even though he's gotten better on the mic, because he can tell a story in the ring. And it's been a pleasant surprise to see that AJ for the last 2 years has been arguably the best worker in their company.
JD, would you have thought I was nuts if I said this to you 4 years ago?
So 4 years ago, he was still in TNA, correct?
Yes, he was just about to get started with Ring of Honor.
See, I don't think I would have thought it was crazy. I think a lot of what Nate said probably sounds about right. So knowing that he was out the door at TNA, no, I don't think it's that crazy. I think the crazier one to me was if you would have said to me that Shinsuke Nakamura would end up in the WWE, I'd be like, no, he won't. But yeah, I think I'll just basically echo everything Nate said. I wouldn't be surprised that he's there, but I would be surprised that they handled him so well, that they let him be the guy. And they really didn't. I mean, like the Pitbull thing, not making Pitbull, it's not going to happen. Stop trying to make it a thing. But yeah, other than that, they really haven't changed him. They just presented him as, this is AJ Styles. You know who AJ Styles is. And that's kind of what they did, and it worked. Because, yeah, we do know who AJ Styles is. And they didn't try to, they never really tried to make him like the WWE's AJ Styles. They just trusted that, he was a character that people knew, and they were right, and we know him and we love him, and I think they've really hit a home run with him. So I think that part is a surprise, but yeah, no, him coming at that point in time wouldn't be a huge shock.
Steve, have they done right by AJ?
Absolutely. He's one of the faces of the company. And as I've been kind of contemplating, the question and thinking back to his debut, obviously he got a huge pop from the crowd. But from what we know about Vince McMahon, he generally doesn't care much what people did before they got to WWE. And so I'm just wondering, and I really don't have the answer to this, how did he pull the trigger on letting him be up top so quickly? Because remember, after Rumble, he had, he was kind of in the mid-card to upper middle card right away, but he never really had to pay those WWE dues. He didn't have to go to NXT.
Right.
He shot right up to the main event.
That's a good point.
I just wonder what happened. Obviously, there's a lot of people there who are going to vouch for him, but it's not like Vince McMahon's watching Ring of Honor and New Japan and 2012 AJ Styles matches from TNA. So, yeah, it just intrigued me as we're talking here. How did that happen?
Yeah. I think the time, and of course, he's been there 2 years almost. Well, yeah, about 2 years now. So,
yeah.
Episode 78, Pete Schermacher made his debut. There was no chewing or snoring. But because Pete's awesome, but he made his debut there. So Steve, just put mystery guest for that one episode, and then eventually I'll listen and we'll figure out who it is. But it is somebody that made their debut.
I'm just making a ticker.
Making a ticker. Let's see. Greg Phillips and Nick Duke were on together for an episode, but they've already been on. Scott and Nate preview, and then Pete came back. Brother Nate. Episode 81. Brandon Howard made his debut with us. Of course, he was a Clotheslines and Headlines alum, and he joined us in episode 81. Then Glenn came back for 82. We're getting to, obviously, some of the more recent episodes. Let's look ahead to the future. Let's say this. Obviously, the way that we pace the show here, Main Event, we go every other week. Let's say 2022 will be episode 200. So let's just presuppose that. Steve, if I said to you, between now and January of 2022, which is 4 years from now, which would probably be episode 200, we will see Kenny Omega in a WWE ring, would you think I'm nuts?
No, not at all. And yeah, I could see that happening within the next 2 years. The limiting factor is going to be Kenny Omega. It's going to be if he decides that's what he's going to do. If he wanted to go right now, like, contracts be damned. If there were no contracts involved, he'd be there. They would sign him in an instant. It's going to be like, do I want to do this? Do I want to let go of the creativity I have? And also, he's not just involved in wrestling. He's like this avid video game guy. Actually, just came out today that he's going to be hosting being a big part of this video game conference / New Japan house show in Florida. They're going to put on later on this year. And he just he likes his freedom. He's a Canadian who lives in Japan full time. So they're going to have to, it's going to be his decision whether he wants to go. And I think at some point he'll give it a shot, see what happens. He'll have enough money in the bank where it's like, okay, let's give this a shot for a year or two. And if I like it, great. If not, I'll just walk away.
Okay. Let me give you 3 more names. By the way, Travis Wokoshin from Lucha Afterground. He made his debut back at episode 83. So there's another name. All right, I'm going to give you 3 more names, Steve. And then, guys, I'll ask all of you, so think about your answers, too. Marty Scurll, Will Ospreay, and Zack Sabre Jr. Will we see any or will we see any or all of them in WWE between now and 2022?
That's really hard, Scott.
Let me ask you a question. Before Steve answers. You say in WWE, define does that mean Raw and SmackDown?
Anywhere. NXT counts. NXT's part of the company. It's got a WWE. NXT does. I don't think there's an NXT watermark on the paycheck. I think they all say WWE.
I just more meant because we've seen Zack Sabre Jr.
No, I mean as a regular, not a. I knew you were going to ask that, JD. Not a tournament, not a tournament one shot. No, a contracted regular.
Okay.
Contracted regular, Steve.
I'm gonna say Marty. Yes, and he'll fail. Will Ospreay will be like an NXT type guy, maybe a 205 Live type guy. And I'm going to say Zack Sabre, no. I think that the way, from what I know, the way he thinks, he is going to be turned off by some of the business parts of WWE. He's kind of a notorious kind of anti-capitalist left-wing guy. He's talked about, moving to Australia, he's going to Japan full time. And I think that's not just part of his character. I think that's legit. And he's already turned him down before.
Okay.
That's my scorching hot take, which, means he'll probably be there in 2 years.
JD? Including Kenny, just those 4 guys. Thumbs up, thumbs down between now and, say, 2022?
I think of the 4, I think Marty's probably the most likely. I think he kind of fits who they go after because he's already got a character fleshed out that could go right on TV. I think Sabre is. Well, to hear Steve say he's already turned them down. I guess I didn't know that because I would think like Zack Sabre Jr., as great as he is, isn't really someone that they would really go after. His style and his look too. Not to like bash the guy because he's in way better shape than I am, but he doesn't really have a WWE wrestler look. You know what I mean? Like he's kind of skinny and tall and slender and not real muscular looking. So it's a picture and be like, who's this guy? But I think Zach probably is a no. I think Marty's probably a definite yes. And I think Kenny depends on his own personal wear and tear. I think when Kenny decides to go to WWE is if, one, he stops being such a hot commodity himself where he is. Steve and I, along with Brett Carlson, went to see Ring of Honor in Chicago. And it was the biggest show they'd ever drawn in Chicago, and Kenny was the headliner. So he's selling tickets wherever he goes now. But in terms of the physical toll, he might want to work, a safer style and go there. So I guess that all depends on how banged up he may be, and we don't even know about it. Will Ospreay, I don't know. It seems like he's just really starting to ramp up in New Japan. And I guess maybe it depends on what... I guess with Ospreay, I'm going to hedge my bets and say, let's see how things go with Ricochet. Because I think if they handle him well, a guy like Ospreay is more likely to give them a chance and go there. And so far, so good with Ricochet, but if he just becomes like a 205 Live guy and kind of gets lost in the shuffle, then I think other guys may be hesitant to try their hand out when they can keep making it elsewhere. So I think Marty's a definite yes for me, though.
And Ricochet has far more charisma and experience than Will Ospreay.
And he's got the endorsement of The Rock, on Twitter and stuff.
That helps. That definitely helps. All right, and then the last couple of...
Hey, by the way, hang on.
Yeah.
I muted while you guys were talking, and I was listening to you talk live, and I fired up the episode. The mystery person was Stephen Ferrari.
That's right, yes. Steve Ferrari did join us, correct. Excellent. Thank you, JD. So there you go, Steve Ferrari. That's right. I am a historian. I've tried to get him. I've tried to get him back on, but his hours are. He works down in the city, so his hours are a fucking disaster. So we will get Mr. Ferrari back on very soon. So
okay.
And of course, Andy Atherton, one of our new guys, he joined us for episodes 98 and 99. And then Nate, you pulled out one at the end there for episode 99. Our man Alex joined us.
Yes.
So there we go, another newbie. So what does that give us, Steve?
That gives us 34 different guests.
34 different guests. I think that's very impressive, and I think we will continue to add more new names to the main event list. Rish, as I mentioned, those 4 names. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I would like to just say thumbs up to all of them, except for, obviously Steve made a really good explanation of it that Zack Sabre Jr. has already turned it down, and that's sort of wait and see. With Kenny Omega, it will happen, and I think it will be big. The thing is, I just hope that he can make the same accomplishments AJ Styles did. Because, Steve asked a question like, what worked? I think the thing with AJ is that, and, Nate being a TNA guy can attest to this, of course, is that I think AJ was just so great that when he came in, he did not have to adapt to anything. People had to adapt to him.
Right.
And he just had the ability to make everybody look good. I think what really won them over was how great he made Roman Reigns look right from the get-go. So there was just no buffer there. It was not like, oh, let's see if AJ can, work with this guy. No, AJ Styles can work with anyone. Can Kenny Omega do that? I would say probably so. But, especially with the evolution of the size of the wrestlers, he can look legitimate pretty quickly. Marty Scurll, he's got a good character. He's got the Bullet Club. And Will Ospreay, I think it's just too, Jordan hit it on the head. I just think there's just too much enticement to get him with Ricochet just to have those series of matches because that's what both got him into the big time. I think they're going to want to go back to that. It's sort of like the Jushin Liger, Brian Pillman theory. Like you always want to pair up the guys that made you.
Right.
Zack Sabre Jr., we'll see. I've heard that Daniel Bryan in his comeback has taken a lot of inspiration from the way Zack Sabre Jr. wrestles.
Oh, he'd love to wrestle him.
So, you know, maybe catch wrestling in the next 4 years really takes a ramp up, and we see a lot more British guys, and that's what gets Sabre in the fold, and they ramp up their offer to get him in. But I'd say yes to all, but a definite yes to Kenny Omega. That's a matter of when.
I have an odd feeling we're never going to see Kenny.
Wow.
But
I have a take on Kenny that I think is interesting, because Andrew compared him to AJ Styles. I think AJ's better than Kenny, but as a guy who I watch Kenny Omega matches, and I think they're good, he's got this vibe about him. He's kind of a weirdo.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, and I almost wonder if he wouldn't click on a major appeal, because he's just kind of weird, right?
Yeah, his sequencing on his matches are very unconventional.
Yeah, and even like if you hear him talk in interviews and stuff, he like speaks like, not that this is weird, but he speaks very proper, and it's just not very wrestling-esque. And there's just something about him that's just weird, and not like in a unique way, like a Mick Foley's a weirdo, but like this guy's kind of weird, you know? Like,
right.
And I can't put my finger on what it is, but he's just always struck me as just an odd dude. Like to the point where like I even think like, you know, behind the curtain when this guy's like not in character, he's just an odd duck, and I don't know if that would help him or hurt him.
Yeah, don't Simon Gotch it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. By the way, if Catch Wrestling takes off, I'm calling Jack Gallagher Royal Rumble win right now.
So that would be fantastic, actually.
Heck yeah, what?
Where he flies out with the he lands last because
he has a Mary Poppins umbrella.
Yeah, the Mary Poppins landing makes him land him slower. Exactly.
Yeah,
guys, this has been a lot of fun, and it's great to have you all back again. If just for one night. But Brother Nate, we are starting a new era. Well, we have started a new era, but a new chapter of Place to Be Nation's main event. So in 2 weeks, episode 101, and I'm guaranteeing we will have a new open. And I'm about to tell you what that new open is when we go off the air. In 2 weeks, episode 101, Steve, you'll be back. We will recap Backlash, because that would have happened the previous Sunday from Newark. I think D'Amato's going to that show. And then we'll finally get to it. It'll be our next TNA pay-per-view recap installment. It'll be episode 4, or pay-per-view number 4. See if we can get Aaron George back from Medicine Hat or whatever mountain he's living on right now. JD, don't be a stranger, you fuck. All right.
Well, I'll
bullshit.
Try not to.
All right.
I'm like Kenny Omega. I'm just the weird one.
You're just the weird guy. Yeah, your English sucks. So
he's just a weird guy.
It's this fucking weird aluminum foil, tin foil hair. It's this tin
I just
foil
walk
hair.
around like the Terminator.
Yeah.
Pure, totally naked.
It's tin foil hair. Reach Man, I love you. You're always awesome.
Oh, thank you.
And they're going to Game 7 at the on the parquet, huh? Can the
Bucks
steal a road game here? What do you think?
I'll say Boston. Brad Stevens is too smart.
Now, who do they play if they win? Toronto?
Philly. Philly, Boston. A classic. An old-timey classic.
I like the Sixers, but if I see another Brad Woodling team win, I'm going to put a gun in my mouth. So, I don't know. But if I see the Celtics win, I may blow my brains out too. So I don't know what the fuck I want there.
These Philadelphia wins are starting to really bother me.
Yeah,
it's starting to strengthen the Brad Woodling ego train.
Yeah, instead of hopping on a chat once a week, now he's on every 3
Instead
days.
of the Brad and Chad show, it's going to be the Brad and Brad show.
Yeah, exactly. And he'll talk, instead of once a week on a chat, he'll talk once every 3 days on a chat.
At least Ryan Howard sucks.
Yes, that's true. Maybe Brad will lose his mind like Gabe Kapler did. Anyway, and Steve, of course, you're always awesome. You're always here to join us. Thank you, Ben. Ben's always welcome here as well. So we'll be back in 2 weeks for the new season, I guess, the episode 101. We'll recap Backlash, and we will do our next TNA pay-per-view classic recap. So, for JD, for the Boogie, for Steve, and for Brother Nate, I am got 100 episodes in the main event. It's been a treat, folks, and it's not ending. Talk to you in 2 weeks. Oh, quickly, before I do that, Brother Nate, next week, you and I will have our next installment of our Top 100 Countdown. Numbers 50 to 41 next week, so we're really getting to the cream of the crop. And so stay tuned for that next week. See you in 2 weeks.
So what about the Evolution of Adam Rose since 2014.
How about the evolution of Shut Up, Reish?